But I'll tell you the truth, I walked in today and literally walking into this room, I was inspired. I was inspired because often I cannot leave my community on Shabbos, so most times when there's big events, I don't come for Shabbos. So I'll come sometimes on Sunday. So I've been in this hotel a number of times on Sunday. And never ever, no matter how big the event is there an audience this large and this interested on Sunday morning. So the fact that you're still here after what was an incredible, inspiring, informative weekend is literally inspiring to me, and it means Rabbi Orlovsky is really good. And the truth is, that was very enjoyable and entertaining. I mentioned before some of the things I do. I want to just give you a drop of background in terms of a small right to be able to speak on this subject. I was never really involved in Kiruv or Chaykim. I'm struggling. I'm going to speak Sephardi, yes? You heard Ashkenazim the whole weekend. Let's do a little Sephardi for a change. Okay. So I am not really so involved in Kiruv Rechokim. But Kiruv Kerovim, I have many years of experience with, meaning people that are Shomer Shabbat, that are basically observant. We've worked with them day and night. And I think that can give us some insight in terms of dealing with what Project Inspire is about. They want us to go home, and when we see something, say something. They want us to go home and see a person, that's a good ring, and see a person who could use some kiruv, that could use some inspiration, and us to take the responsibility to deliver it. Now again, this is very difficult for me to talk about because you've had a whole weekend hearing the exact same subject. Sometimes when there's a weekend like this, they have a unique subject for Sunday morning. So I'm like, okay, I'll speak just about that subject. They never heard about it before. But you've been hearing about this in every speech, everything that's happened throughout the weekend. You heard about the exact same subject. So honestly, I'm not saying this humility and I have a whole answer. I honestly was really unsure what to share with you. So I'm going to take a stab at it. I'm going to try and give you 3 steps that I think will be very helpful. The next time you're sitting on a plane and you realize the person sitting next to you is Jewish. The next time you're on a long line in the store and the person cracks a little joke, they call it bageling, that hints to you that they know that Passover is coming. The next time you're in your office and there's a coworker who seems to show a little interest. I'm going to give you 3 steps, and these 3 steps are going to be based on a trip that I took a few months ago, 2 months ago. I took about 25 boys from our organization, Kesher, boys that are observant, basically, Shomer Shabbat. Not yeshiva boys, but Shomer Shabbat. And we went to Israel for an incredibly intense 4 days. We landed Sunday afternoon, and we flew out by Thursday night. And we crisscrossed the country. We saw Rabbanim, we saw hostages, we saw parents of hostages. We saw places where terror attacks took place. We saw army bases and hospitals. And in the process of seeing and meeting so many people, these 3 ideas were born. Here's the first. The first thing is that when you meet someone and they're not as observant and they're not as religious as you, they don't know as much as you, share in their pain. The Pasuk says about Moshe Rabbeinu, Vayar b'sivlotam, he saw their pain. When Am Yisrael was in bondage in Egypt, and says Rashi, Natan enav v'libo, he gave his eyes and his heart, liyot metzara lehem, to feel their pain. It's not just heart, it's your eyes. You need to see and witness and feel their pain. So to display this point, I'm going to share with you some of the pain that's going on in Am Yisrael right now in Israel. I don't know how many people in this room have been to Israel since Simchat Torah. And if I asked for a show of hands, I wouldn't be able to see them, so I have no idea. The Rambam writes, when you visit a sick, he gives a few reasons why you do Bikur Cholim. And he says one of the reasons is to daven for them. And the question is, if I'm going to daven for you, why do I got to go to your hospital bed? I could daven more at home. I don't have to waste time driving, parking, driving back, going up, finding your room. Why can't I just daven at home? Says the Rambam, because until you see it and feel it, your davening changes. Everyone here has heard, as was mentioned before, ad nauseum about October 7th. But there's nothing like seeing it and feeling it. And I'm going to try to describe the pain that's happening in Israel today. I'll give you a few scenes. The first one is we went to Be'eri. Be'eri is a kibbutz in the south. I believe 98 people were killed in that one kibbutz alone. And about 10 hostages were taken. And we walked through, and you've never seen more mangled metal and destroyed brick. And we then get to a spot where there's like a villa, a house. In Be'eri, there's regular like houses. They're attached, but they're houses. And we're standing on the rubble. And you see, it's just destroyed bricks. You go into the room and there's 2,000 bullet holes in one room. Shattered glass. You see the Israeli soldiers already written things on their houses, how many bodies they found, how many body parts they found. It's written in different colors. It's a very intense scene. But what was most intense to me is standing on the rubble with the boys. And the tour guide is speaking. I bend down to see, and I see all this broken, destroyed brick. And then all of a sudden you see toys in the rubble. A teddy bear. A little game. The one thing that struck me the most, I bent down, touched it. It's a little magnet tile. My youngest son loves magnet tile. I'm just imagining those people in those houses. It all began at 6:30 in the morning. 6:25. There were probably a bunch of kids who came downstairs, running around, playing with their toys, annoying their parents, waking up too early. They had no idea what was about to happen. You feel and see the pain. I'll give you another example, another little story. This tour guide starts sharing what it was like on that day. He lives there. He says, I'm in my house, and the sirens sound, and sirens don't mean anything to us. Like, we hear it all the time. But we all of a sudden, they started to sound again and again, and we realized this was intense and this was different. So I got myself a cup of coffee. I got all my kids into the safe room. Now, what's scary about the safe room is the safe room is built for bombs, not for terrorists. So the door doesn't lock, I guess, because if a bomb explodes, you could run out or something like that. So he said, I put all my children in a room, and I'm standing holding the door for hours and hours. He said, because it was dangerous, I grabbed my phone and I see the chat, the family chat. My mother-in-law also lives in Be'eri, he says, writes on the chat, Dad is okay. Then she writes at 9:30, I think he's going to be okay. And then the chat stops. He says we would find out that night, once the soldiers came, they didn't get there till like 4:30, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, that they had taken my father-in-law and my mother-in-law, and a bunch of old people from this kibbutz, and they lined them up on the street, about 25 of them, made them get on their knees, and from behind executed them one at a time. My wife, he says, lost her father and her mother in the same minute. You could see the pain. I'll give you one other example. We went to the spot of the Nova Festival. So the spot is very large. It's a big area of land. And what they did is they put a stick in the ground, and on top of the stick, they show a picture of one of the kids in the festival that was taken and that was killed. And then there's another stick with another picture of another person that was killed. And then another stick with another picture. Ladies and gentlemen, there are 395 sticks, 395 pictures. And walking through it, especially the boys that I were with, that have partied in their life, they're in their 20s. They just couldn't breathe. Going from picture to picture. And then there's a forest, and then in the forest there's more memorials, because what had happened, so many of the people that were there that night ran into the forest, or that morning ran into the forest. And the terrorists came from behind and executed them in the back. The pain is intense. But most of us are not going to have an opportunity that often in our life to be mekarev people in Israel. The reason why I shared all those stories is because I believe that here in this country, the pain is pretty intense too. Maybe it's not blown up homes, and in Be'eri we went from one house, it was like 130 homes in a row with the same scene. Maybe it's not blown up homes, but there is a lot of pain in the Jewish nation today. What's odd about our time is that physically, I don't think the Jewish people have ever had a more enjoyable lifestyle. You walk around our neighborhoods, people are knocking down houses to build bigger ones. People have beautiful cars in their driveway. There are more boys learning in yeshiva, more girls learning in Beis Yaakov and in seminaries than maybe since the beginning of our exile. People are flying around in private jets. People are giving donations at times, what seems very easily. Life looks great. You go to a place like Lakewood, you can't get a wedding hall for months because so many people are getting married. Life looks great. Life expectancy is longer than it's ever been. You know how much longer life expectancy is today than it was 100 years ago? It's unbelievable. Life looks awesome. Yet inside, I don't know if we've ever dealt with more mental and emotional pain that we have today. People are struggling. People have anxiety. The mother of the daughter who's 22, who she thinks is 22, going on 32. The father who looks at the cost of living and says, this is impossible. I make 170 grand. Why do I feel poor? There's pain. There's mental health challenges. There's real pain. There's so many bachurim in those yeshivas that I just mentioned that struggle. Don't know if they belong, don't know if they fit, don't know if they can meet the standard. There's real, genuine pain. In fact, this Shabbat I made a retreat in our Kesher organization for about 150 post-high school girls. And we had speeches and sessions, and on Motzei Shabbat, they danced and whatever they did. And I did a lot of speeches and panels. But I'll tell you what, he did most of the time. I sat in the room off to the side, they called it the tea room. People were milling around getting their snacks. And one girl after another would come over to talk about what's on their mind for 5-10 minutes. I was up till 3:30 in the morning Friday night and 3:15 last night. Not 1,000 girls, there's 150 girls. Each girl comes. Sometimes they sit with their friend. Within 2 minutes, they burst out in tears. They're nervous about their family. They're nervous about getting married. It's just there's so much struggle and so much pain. And there's also a ton of pain in the secular world in this country. The world out there, secular Jews, really anyone who's secular. There's so much going on. I'll give you some examples that I think are just symbols of this. Do you know how much money was gambled on the Super Bowl in 2021, 3 years ago? I'm not taking answers. I guess no one knows the answer. The answer is $4.3 billion. In 2024, the amount of money gambled on the Super Bowl was $23 billion. The world has lost their mind. Part of our organization is that I go to campuses and give shiurim in campuses. So I go to a lot of local ones. I go to Baruch College and give a shiur to our community boys on Wednesday afternoon. Right next to the college, there's a drugstore. Now, when I was a kid, a drugstore meant a place to buy Tylenol. This drugstore has like a leaf on the picture outside. So I'm like, wow, they must sell wonderful flowers in this store. They're feeding it to kids, begging them to take it. It's legal. It's everywhere. You walk out in your street. I don't know where you live, but I know I live in Brooklyn, New York. I walk out of my house. I live in a normal block. I walk out of my house. I smell it morning, noon, and night. It's everywhere. Alcohol is everywhere. You have people that are addicted to their phone to somehow dull their pain and at the same time create more pain. I was once sitting on a plane, and sometimes when I fly, I forget to tell them I care about my seat. So I ended up in row 29 in the middle seat, which is not always the end of the world until I got to this row 29. And the man sitting next to me needed 2 chairs. So I was sitting like this the whole flight, 2.5 hours. So I kept watching this man. He's in his 40s or 50s. 2.5 hours. This is what he was doing. 2.5 hours. This is what he did, nothing else. For 2.5 hours, he played Candy Crush. Crushing, doing. I'm like, you got nothing else going on in your life other than crushing candy? The world is in pain. So here's step 1. When you meet someone who's a secular Jew, don't judge them. Don't preach to them. Maybe you don't even have to teach them. Just share in their pain. Find a way to understand them. Roll your eyes and say, wow, doesn't everything cost so much today? And they'll be like, wow, you understand me. And then you make another comment. Don't do it weird. Don't do it awkward. Do it smooth. Do it smart. But relate. Let them feel like you get it. And you say, yeah, kids today, there's such a struggle. And next thing you know, the guy will open up and he'll say, yeah, you know, my kid barely wants to talk to me. He's 20 years old. I did everything for that kid and he never talks to me. And now all of a sudden you say back, yeah, kids are difficult. And they're all addicted to their phone. They can't even look up. And now all of a sudden you have a bond. You didn't say a word about Torah yet. You didn't say a word about mitzvot yet. You didn't say a word about God yet. You just understood what they're dealing with. Once you understand, once you relate, you're in. Because in this world that we're living with so many people, with so much pain, dull to sleep, most of the issues in the secular world is not philosophical. There's not 100 geniuses out there debating God. It's just emotional. They're just struggling. Sharing their struggle, and you're in the door. I'll give you one last image from Be'eri that might stick in my mind the most, that I think displays the world we're in today. We're walking through, so first you see like the place where the kids are is destroyed, and the next thing is destroyed. And then we're walking to the houses. And as we're walking with the tour guide, we walk through this space. Maybe it's the size of this half of the room. That's all green grass with trees. It was fall, so leaves had fallen to the grass. And the tour guide stopped for a split second. I'm not even sure if anyone else heard besides me. He says, stop here and look. I stopped and looked. He says, you can't see anything. The house over there, the walls look fine. Over there, the walls look fine. Here you see green grass. He says, if you would just come to this spot, you would think nothing happened here on Simchat Torah. And as I was walking through the grass, I said, so many people's lives are the exact same thing. We're so skilled at showing the world the grass. We show the world that our life looks phenomenal. Happy husband, wife, mother, daughter, son, phenomenal. And we're so skilled at making no one see the devastation. No one see our daughter who puts her head to sleep every night crying because of her anxiety. No one to see our son who's struggling. We have no one see our financial struggles because we somehow find a way to put our best foot forward and make everyone think that it's great. Sit down next to anyone you're sitting next to, secular Jew, assume they're in pain. Don't say, by the way, I heard you're in pain, or Rabbi Haber told me. Don't do it that way. Do it smart, do it smooth. But some comment that kind of relates to what they're struggling with. And next thing you know, you're with them. And then you have a conversation and it could go anywhere. And you can say, the truth is, you know what? I also have that struggle a little bit. But my children, they read the Bible and they study the Torah. And so it gives us, common ground and morals and values that go from generation to generation. And say, really, what's it like? And they'll say, I heard of Shabbat. Then you'll tell them what Shabbat is like. And you say, the truth is, life is so hectic. You'll tell them, and it's so chaotic. And we have 1 million emails and WhatsApps and text messages and meetings all happening at the same time. And then Friday night, whether we like it or not, Shabbat comes. In fact, I have someone I know pretty well who was a major real estate person in the Syrian community. We'll call him Freddie. He says one time he had a meeting with a man who is the head of a real estate company called Blackstone. I believe Blackstone runs more real estate than any other company in the world. He said, I sat with this man, let's call the man Tom, I forget the name. And Freddie tells Tom, we make sure it's kosher. And Tom says, you still do that? You care about that? So Freddie says back, you want to know if I care about that? He says, you're involved in real estate, right? You have real estate all over the world. He says, yeah. That means you get a call from one day from Moscow, another day from Madrid, another day from France, another day from New York, the next day from LA, the next day from Las Vegas. He says, yeah, and everyone's in a different time zone. He says, Tom, you are a slave. He says, me, Friday afternoon, in our archaic laws, I turn off my phone, not because I'm ready, not because I want to, because I have to. I have no choice. And I turn off my phone and I become free. And I sit with my family and we talk about a Saturday night, a Friday night dinner, and we have highs and lows of the week and we sing together. We can sit at the table for 2-3 hours. He says, I go Saturday morning, I go to synagogue, I talk, see my friends, I get inspired, I give a little charity. Then Saturday afternoon, I come back to have a lunch with my children and we're smiling, the weather's beautiful. Then I'll go to a friend's house in the afternoon, I'll go to a lecture, I get inspired. He says, Tom, you're a slave, I'm free. Tom says, wow, because Tom was Jewish too. The next year, Freddie and Tom had another meeting together. And Tom says to Fred, I have to tell you, he says, I'm not as religious as you, but I started having Friday night dinner. We put away our phones and we have Friday night dinner. Freddie, you've changed my life. That's a way of sharing and what they're feeling with in a cool, relevant way. Not like, oh, what's your life like? You must be struggling. It must be terrible. That's awkward. Do it smooth, but get in the door. That's number one. Number two, which I'll take shorter than number one took, is when you go to Israel, if you've been there in the last few months, you will see our nation has an incredible spirit. The Pasuk says, Hashem told Moshe Rabbeinu and the Jewish people at the burning bush, he said, Eheyeh asher eheyeh. I will be that I will be. What kind of name is that? I will be that I will be. And Rashi explains, but the Kedushat HaLevi explains it even further. He says what it means is that Hashem says, I'm making a promise for you. I will be with you now, and I will always be with you. Go through the land of Israel, go through that country today in Eretz Israel, and you will see there's an Eheyeh Asher Eheyeh literally oozing out of the people in that country. And I'm going to give you a few examples. I went to one of the most incredible places in the world, Tel HaShomer Hospital. I'm not sure if you're familiar with what Tel HaShomer Hospital is. It's a hospital where injured soldiers and people who were affected by terror attacks are taken care of. It's near Tel Aviv. And we went to the hospital. You ever walk on the street and see someone in a wheelchair and then all of a sudden realize they only have one leg? And your automatic reflex is like, turn away. In Tel HaShomer Hospital, everyone's missing legs. And somehow, you don't feel like you need to turn away. There is a happiness in that place that's crazy to see. We went on a beautiful day. The weather was wonderful. So a lot of the patients were sitting outside, soldiers with injuries. And we saw one soldier. One man actually wasn't a soldier. A woman was sitting there and she says, I want you to meet my husband. She clearly did not look very religious. But I want you to meet my husband. Her husband comes out with a kippah on. I said, what's your story? He said, here's my story. He says, I was driving to pray Mincha one afternoon in Netivot a few weeks ago. And we heard a siren. He says, I jumped out of my hand. When you hear a siren, you're supposed to do is park the car, jump out of the car, and you lie down on the ground flat. So I lay on the ground and put my hands on top of my head. And I'm lying right near the car. And a few feet away, a bomb blows up. And a piece of shrapnel goes underneath the car and blows up the car. And with it, it blew off my arm. And he has a smile. And he believes in Hashem. I know students that if they daven Shacharis and they don't get what they want by the afternoon, they're doubting. This man lost his arm on the way to davening Mincha. And he has no questions. There's a spirit. So one soldier say, he's standing there without a leg. He's got crutches, one leg, missing the other. What's your story? He says, my story is that my unit, we went into Gaza and we went into a house and we didn't realize it was booby-trapped. He said, and the house blew up. He said, on that day we lost 4 soldiers and an additional 6 legs. He says, and I wish I could go back in. I said, what? There's a spirit. There's a spark inside of our nation that is incredible. There are some people that it's hard to find, but in most Jews, it's not so hard to find. I can't tell you how many Chiloni soldiers, Lagamri, that we met with, and they just were happy to see a smiling face. We brought some food. We had a barbecue with them. They were just so happy to talk. There's a spark. We met one man, this one last example of that person in Tel HaShomer Hospital. He was standing tall. He was a colonel. He was surrounded by his family when we met him in the hospital. He was shot right through his Adam's apple. And he's talking. And he's playing music with us. So the next time you meet someone, you need to realize that our nation has a spirit like no others. And every now and then you'll bump into a person who's like as cold as ice, and you leave that to the professionals. But 80, 90% of people are normal and regular, and they have a spark inside that they're waiting for it to be ignited. Which leads me to step 3. You see, I was quick with that one. Step 3 also. We're going to try to end by 12:45, hard stop. Not try, we're going to end. Step 3 is this. If you could share in their pain, in their struggle that everybody has, and you could recognize their spark, then you could feed them belief with love. You share their pain and recognize their spark, you could feed them belief with love. It says, we say in davening, Kikel Goel Chazak Ata. Hashem is a redeemer that is strong. What does it mean he's a redeemer that's strong? The answer is standard Geulah, redemption, usually happens to people that deserve it. They earned it. They davened, they were a good person, they were sick, they davened, and Hashem said, you're a good enough person. And I decided that the right thing for you is to come out of that sickness, and you get a Geulah that you earned. Sometimes even great people don't earn, but sometimes great people earn. But what is the word chazak? Chazak means that even sometimes people that don't earn it and don't deserve it, Hashem brings redemption for them too. I'm going to conclude with 3 examples of how you could feed people belief with love. People that you might say, this guy doesn't deserve, this guy's not holding. You can. And I'll give you 3 examples. One of the people we met when we were there is we went up north and we met Rabbi Grossman. Anyone here familiar with Rabbi Grossman? Good. Okay, you could clap for Rabbi Grossman. And it's incredible to see his operation. But he shared with us and the boys his story. It's called The Disco Rabbi. Here's his story. What's his story? His story is that in 1967, Israel went to war. And for the first time since the country's inception, they got the Kotel back. Shavuot, they opened the Kotel for the first time, and the first time really in a very long time that Jews could really go there in freedom. He says, and I went to the Kotel that day, and I was standing next to the Kotel, and I was crying. Now, just so you understand, Rabbi Grossman grew up in Me'ah She'arim. There is no more sheltered town in the planet Earth than Me'ah She'arim. You've been there, you know what I mean. It is its own sheltered place. He grew up in Me'ah She'arim. His father was a Rav. He wrote Sfarim in Me'ah She'arim. So he's standing at the Kotel and he's crying. He says, Hashem, you gave us this gift of the Kotel being returned to our people. So I owe you a gift. How can I pay you back? And he's thinking and he says, what does Hashem love most? He loves his children. So he says, I'm going to try to help Hashem with his children. He looks on the Israeli map and he says, let me find the worst town in Israel. And he finds the worst town. Migdal Emek. And he goes up, he's a young man from Me'ah She'arim. And he goes up to Migdal Emek. And he arrives in the town, he goes to the local shul, he says, where are the young boys? They said, the young boys are not in the shul in Migdal Emek. Migdal Emek had the worst crime rate, the most drugs, the most alcohol in the entire country. So the boys, you know where they are. They're in the disco. He says, I don't know what a disco is. He says, there's a yeshiva called disco? And his hat, his long jacket from Me'ah She'arim, Rabbi Grossman walks into a disco. I have no idea what took place on that day. Here's what I know. Today, 40,000 students have gone through his system and changed their lives because of him. How'd you do it? The answer is, if you understand their pain and you believe in their spark, you can feed them belief with love. All he went in with, no skill set, no training, no sophisticated books. He just walked in with love. He says, in fact, one boy was sad one day. He says, why are you sad? He says, because my brother's in jail. He says, if your brother's in jail, it means my brother's in jail. And through that, Rabbi Grossman set up shiurim in jails across the country. He said, there are 2 towns on the planet that are completely Shomer Shabbat. Bnei Brak and Migdal Emek. Crime went from 100% to 0. Now, if I was talking to Rabbi Grossman on that day in 1967, I would have told him, you want to help Hashem's children? Why don't you go back to Mea Shearim, sit in some shtibel there, find 4 bachrim that want to learn Bava Metzia, and teach them Bava Metzia. That's what you're trained to do. But this man had a heart that was bigger than that. Not a skill set, not a training, just a heart. And he walked in with love, and that said, if I could feed them love, feed them belief with love, I can change anyone. Now let me give you my next 2 examples. The next one is in Tel HaShomer Hospital. We went to a cafe. In the cafe, someone said to me, right over there in the corner, the girl named Mia Shem. You know who Mia Shem is? She's pretty much the most famous hostage in Israel. So I said, I want to say something to her. The entire trip was going over to random people. I said, I want to say something. He says, you're not going to be able to. She's always on the phone. It's like her way of like hiding. I said, okay. We went inside, saw more patients, came back to the cafe. She wasn't on the phone. I said, you know what? I'm going to give it a shot. Worst comes to worst, she walks away. She's getting a cup of coffee. I go over to her. I say, I just want to tell you, the entire nation of Am Yisrael is inspired from you. Oh, I said this. I said, I am a rabbi, which is a negative, from America, which is a positive, from New York, big positive. I said, I want you to know that our nation is inspired from you, and everyone is praying for you. And Hashem should give you beracha, and give you strength, and give you health. She says, can I get you a cup of coffee? I said, no, I don't do coffee. I said, Hashem should protect you and guide you and watch you in everything you go, and you should get married and have children. And she says, if there's one thing we learned on October 7th, it's that Hashem is running the world. Now, I don't know if there's anyone more irreligious than this girl. Her fiance, I believe, is the person who ran the festival. But even someone with that background, if you come with kindness, has a spark. And here's my last example, and I'm going to conclude. One of the things we did is we went to an army base, and a Rav in New York told me that the best part of your trip is going to be when you go to the army base and you have a concert with Kobe Peretz. Anyone know who Kobe Peretz is? In between, okay. Kobe Peretz is one of the superstar singers, irreligious singers in Israel. So I come, I'm like, you sure? He says, don't worry, it's going to be the highlight of the trip. So we get there, and all these soldiers are there. Kobe stands on the stage, which in this army base basically was a chair. He stood on a chair, and me and my boys are behind him, like these celebrities who came from America. And he starts singing his song. He has a beret, no kippah. He starts singing his songs. And there were even some female soldiers in the front. I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, I got to get out of here fast. There's no place for a rabbi to be. And all of a sudden, within 2 minutes, Kobe says, stops the singing. He says, we have a rabbi here for America with boys from Arzot HaBrit. And they sponsor tefillin. Who in this crowd, which soldier wants to start wearing tefillin for the first time in his life? And all of a sudden, a soldier comes forward and says, I want to. And Kobe gives him a hug. And then one of my boys gives him the tefillin. And I give him a beracha. And then another soldier comes forward and says, I want to. And then another one comes forward, and another one comes forward. Before you know it, dozens of soldiers, I want tefillin, I want tefillin. I'm like, am I watching this? And then Kobe takes off his beret, he goes to the person next to him, he says, give me a kippah. He puts on his kippah. And he starts chanting this army base that had about 1,000 soldiers. It was a big event. He starts chanting, Hashem Melech, Hashem Malach. And the whole place is chanting. And I'm like watching this. Ana Hashem Hoshi Ana. And they're all chanting it. And then the soldiers start dancing with us and hugging us. One soldier came over to me. He was so excited about his tefillin. He says, I can't thank you enough. I had to give you something. He goes, pulls me to the side, opens up a box. He says, we have fresh army jackets. I want to give you one as a gift. Our nation is incredible. This is not a responsibility to inspire people. This is not a job. This is an opportunity. Because when you take this opportunity, you will see that there's a beauty in our people that us in our little neighborhoods sometimes never recognize. That person sitting on the plane or on the aisle in the store, or your coworker that you think is just an irreligious Jew, sharing their struggle, and then see their spark. And with love, they start to believe, and it's an incredible thing to witness. You came here this weekend because you believe you have it inside of you. You came here this weekend because you believe that you can help change the world. Close to 1,000 people here. If every person goes out of here from Project Inspired and leaves here inspired, leaves here with a spark and an energy, and you do it in a wonderful, smooth, comfortable way, you will start changing lives all over the place. And 1 turns into 2, turns into 4, turns into 8. And before you know it, you can't believe where you are. And collectively, it's incredible what we can do. And the world we're in, with the technology we have, makes it even easier. All of a sudden, you can keep in touch with someone just by sending a text message or putting them in a little chat, send them a little voice note. And all of a sudden, you're changing lives. We're at a time that is difficult beneath the surface. But beneath that surface, we're at a time that is incredibly beautiful. And the opportunity has never been greater. If we can have the belief inside of us, if we can walk around inspired inside of us, then the next person we meet, we shake their hand, we share their pain, we see their spark, and with love, we inspire them to believe. Thank you.